everyone, my name is Asha and I'm a licensed master's social worker in the state of South Carolina. I decided to do this video because I know that there are a lot of individuals graduating with their MSW, a lot of individuals who are currently in the field that are interested in getting their license. So I felt like it would be perfect time right now, since we're all pretty much stuck inside, to start studying if you're interested in obtaining your license. So today I'm going to be providing you with 3 tips for preparing for the exam. I'm also going to give you a little bit of information on the registration process, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information on what to expect on exam day. So here we go. We're going to jump right in with tip number 1. So the first thing that you want to do is identify your study materials. When you're studying for the exam, you don't want to go overboard with picking your study materials. You probably want to stick to maybe 2 or 3. You want to stay pretty consistent with one resource that you know is your go-to for review, one resource that you had in grad school probably, so maybe old tests, especially from psychopathology, because that class is basically going to give you an overview of the DSM. It's going to give you an overview of diagnoses and symptoms, which is really all you need. You don't need to go back and read through the entire DSM-5. You also probably want to find some sort of an app that gives you some review questions, because review questions are going to be how you practice and learn when you're studying. So I would suggest that you use the Dawn AppGuard Social Work ASWB Master's Exam Guide. Whew, that was a mouthful. That awesome resource is what I used when I was studying, and it gives a really good, brief, concise overview of each of the different items that you might see on the exam without being too overwhelming. So you can also go back to your exams and review those about theory, etc. But if you want to kind of get a quick overview, be able to get through the material, maybe sticking to the one study book might be really helpful for you. It was really helpful for me. The other thing that I would suggest downloading is an app for either your phone or your computer, like the LMSW Pocket Prep. That was an awesome app. It kind of reminded me of the SAT apps. So they have like a question of the day. They also have 10 question quizzes that you can take, and those will be really helpful to give you timed reviews. That will provide you with the opportunity to kind of see where you're at when you're answering the types of questions that you can expect on the exam. So moving right along to tip number 2. You want to create a study schedule. So you probably want to give yourself about 2 months of prep time, consistent prep time for the exam. And this will probably vary based on how you prefer to study, how long it's been since you've been exposed to the material, and then the amount of time that you have during the week to dedicate to studying. And I mean really studying, so actually sitting down for an hour to 2 hours to review the material. If your state allows you to take the exam prior to graduation, studying might look different because you're in school, you're actively learning, you're already in academic mode. So the information is fresh in your mind, and you might only need a little bit of a refresher. But if you've been out of school for a while, you've been working, you might need to actually sit down and go through everything meticulously and be really intentional with your studying. As a little side note, yes, there are people who have told me that they've passed the exam without studying, but that exam is $230 of your American dollars, and if you fail, you have to wait 90 days probably before you take the exam again. There are a lot of jobs that require a license before you start working for them, so why push your luck? Just study the first time so that you don't have to worry about it later on down the road. Tip number 3, take practice exams. Okay, so at the very least, you want to take one practice exam. This could be through the Don Apgar website that comes with your book. This could be in the MSW Pocket Prep in the app, or you could use the more official ASWB practice exam, which is located on their website. It's $80, I think, $80 or $90, so you do have to pay for it, but that will probably give you the closest inclination to what you can expect on the exam. The screen is set up exactly like the exam screen would be, and you can still flag stuff. Like, it will give you a pretty good opportunity to identify how it's going to look when you're in the exam room on exam day. So you can definitely use that resource, or you could just go for adding a number of questions to your quizzes or to your reviews that you do using the link provided through the Don Apgar book. So when you're taking the exam, remember that there are going to be 170 questions on the test, but only 150 of them are counted. Now, this does not mean that you can skip 20 questions and be fine. You always want to answer every single question, even if you're guessing. So you probably want to do process of elimination for the hard questions and guesstimate or guess between the two answers that you feel might be closest to the right one. Because if you guess, you'll have at least a 25% chance of getting it correct. Whereas if you leave it blank, then you're going to get 0, right? And you want all the points that you can get when you're taking this exam. I would say after you've done your review of the book, whatever resource you're using, after you completed that, then you want to start taking those practice tests, because they're limited questions and you don't want to waste practice tests. You want to make sure that you've reviewed all the information and you're really testing your knowledge of what you've learned. Now, you don't want to memorize the questions that you have on these practice tests or quizzes or practice questions, whatever you're doing. You do want to answer those questions and then review your answers and identify how they got to that answer and why it's correct. Because there are going to be a lot of questions that look similar on a lot of these practice exams and also on the real exam, but you don't want to memorize that question and think, oh, well, I saw this question before, because chances are you probably haven't. So you don't want to get yourself tripped up because you thought that you saw it. Okay, so there you have it. 3 tips for preparing for your Licensed Master's Social Work exam. Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of bonus information on scheduling your exam and what to expect on exam day. So here we go. In order to schedule your exam, you're going to need to apply for your license through the licensing board in your state. So you're going to have to fill out an application. There is probably going to be an application fee. For South Carolina, that's $45. And they're going to request a number of documents like identification documents, verification of presence in the state, official transcripts from your school, and if you're in South Carolina and you're taking the exam before you graduate, they're also going to require a letter from your program identifying your projected graduation date. So after you submit all these documents, you're going to get permission from the licensing board to schedule your exam. So when you're scheduling the exam, you probably want to pick a testing center that's either in an area that you're familiar with or somewhere that's close enough that you can drive to kind of get yourself acclimated with the location, because you don't want to be stressed out because you don't know where you're going on exam day. If you can, pick a location that's close to you, that's familiar. If you can't, try to pick somewhere that you can either drive to or maybe stay overnight with a friend so that you can kind of get a feel for where you are. Last but not least, exam day. So on exam day, you're going to need 2 forms of ID and yourself. That's it. So you don't need to bring a huge purse, ladies. You don't need to bring a backpack. You don't need to bring your study materials. Just bring your license or state ID, your work badge, and yourself. That's it. So when you go into the testing center, there's going to be lockers for you to put your stuff in, small lockers. So they'll let you do that. And then when you go into the room, you're going to have your own computer space. Now remember, there are going to be people in the testing center that are taking other licensing exams. So there'll be people coming in and leaving while you're sitting for your exam. Now, remember that you only need to focus on your 4-hour test. So regardless of how many people are coming and going, you still have 4 hours from the time that you started to complete your exam. So take your time. Don't worry about other people leaving. Make sure that you're answering every single question. Don't leave anything blank. And I know I said that before, but I'm saying it again because it's so important. It's better for you to try and get no points than not try and miss out on a question that you could have gotten right just by chance, right? So remember to at least guess if you don't know it. And you can always go back and flag it and review it after if you think that there's a better answer out there. So after you finish the questions in your exam and you submit it, you're going to go to a demographic screen where they ask you 7 or 8 questions. I can't quite remember exactly how many questions there were, but there are a couple questions on demographics, and then you get to the screen that will tell you whether you passed or you failed. So generally, you only need about 90 to 107 questions in order to pass. Now, this depends on the difficulty of your exam. So if your exam is harder, you're going to need closer to 90, more on the lower end number of questions correct in order to pass. But if your questions are easier, like if your test is made up of a number of easier questions, you're probably going to need more questions, so closer to 107 in order to pass. So there you have it. 3 tips for preparing for the exam, how to schedule, and what to expect on test day. I think that the most important thing about this whole process is to be consistent. So it's really easy to get discouraged when you're studying for something for 2 months. It can be a little bit daunting, but remember that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and once you get that pass score back, it's going to be one of the best things in the world, because even though you graduated, you've actually made it your license, and you can actually start going into the world and doing the good that you intended to do when you started your MSW program. Honestly, there are going to be people, I know people who haven't passed on their first try, and it's okay if you don't pass on the first try, because just because you pass on the first try does not make you the best social worker in the world, and just because you don't pass on the first try doesn't mean that you're not a good social worker. It just might mean that you didn't prepare enough, or you're just not good at taking tests, which happens to some people. So make sure that when you're studying for the exam and when you're taking the exam, you're being kind to yourself, and you're remembering that at the end of the day, it's just a test, and it doesn't mean that you're a good or not so good social worker. So if you guys have any questions for me, please drop them below. I'm also going to put the links for my study materials, the links for the ASWB website, and the link for the social work website that will give you some information on what each state requires for licensure that I thought was really helpful. So I can speak for South Carolina and Georgia, but I can't really speak for any other states, but I know that the process is generally pretty similar with applying before you can actually sit for the test. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to try to provide some review for the exam itself and try to help you guys out as much as I can in this whole process. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.